Everybody walks around the workplace or walks around their life with unanswered existential questions.
Yeah.
Who am I? Do I matter? Does my work matter?
Yep.
So most people are not living according to their purpose.
It sucks. And we realize that people deserve more.
So you remember, like, all of this started because I was obsessed with purpose. I had been researching purpose for almost a year. I have to figure it out for me, and clearly there's not a solution for people to be able to figure it out for themselves. I found my opening because we were doing a 2-day training with a big company, huge. I shut down the PowerPoint.
You started talking about one of the core elements of your purpose. I came back into the room, remember, and like everybody's crying. Literally everybody's crying. I was like, you broke all of the executives. Like, what in the world happened? So many people kept asking us for it was, can you come back in and talk about purpose?
Welcome to The Purpose Factor, where we help you discover your exact purpose and what's next for you. This is the show that is meant to help you unpack transitions, unpack career decisions, unpack how to optimize your life, and be confident about the thing you're going after and the steps to achieve it.
Okay, so when I met you, I was looking for a husband.
And I was looking for a wife.
Yeah, and I think when I first started talking to you, I knew that if it was going to work out with you or with anybody else, that there had to be a couple things in place. Obviously, core values had to be the same. We had to value the same thing, be wanting to go the same direction. I wanted someone who had intellectual curiosity. Like, when you're with someone, it's like you have to be curious about the same things or similar things, where it's like, what are you interested in? What are you studying? What are your opinions? Like, I wanted to find someone who I wanted to know what they thought about things because I respected them, et cetera. And then I think the third thing was, like, are we both going in a similar direction? Because I had been in enough relationships that I knew what it was like to be the trophy girlfriend, to be the person who kind of came alongside and supported them. And I knew that that was not it for me. I was like, I'm too opinionated. I'm too sassy. I'm too driven. I'm going to drive someone insane if they think that I'm just going to, like, you know, sit over here, look cute, and shut up.
And I didn't want that.
Yeah.
What you're describing, I didn't want that. You know, it's interesting because I think what you and I would both say is that we wanted shared vision, not just values, but shared vision. Somebody that we could both build something together. Like, that was the goal for both of us as we were looking for a spouse. We wanted somebody we could build something with.
Did you think that we were going to start a business from the first time we met?
Not necessarily. That one wasn't really there. I mean, we both were entrepreneurs.
Right.
We both probably knew we would never work traditional jobs. We both knew that we were going to build something. I don't think we knew quite yet that we were going to build something together.
Yeah.
Because when we got married, like, I had my own business starting right when we got married. You had been essentially a keynote speaker for what, almost a year? Almost a year.
Right.
You were keynote speaking full time. You didn't have a job. And I remember, gosh, when we got married, I started my first digital course business the week after getting home from the honeymoon.
No, literally in the U-Haul. Remember,
I was
you
doing
were
sales
having
calls,
me drive the U-Haul,
which is terrifying.
Which is such a bad idea.
So see, Gab, you've got what? You've got an astigmatism, right? So first
Thanks
of all,
for pointing
you're
that
really,
out.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're great at
I
driving.
cannot drive at night. Literally,
She's good at
everything
driving
is
during the
blurry. I genuinely don't drive at night.
Do you know how they put out those signs where, like, they warn human beings, like deer crossing? They put out signs for deer to warn that Gab is driving. It is not a good situation. Like, it got so bad where Brian would just be like, I'm like, why are you doing 15 miles per hour under the speed limit
I can't see.
at night?
I literally can't see. Yeah, astigmatism is not.
So we paint the picture
it's
here.
It's a pandemic.
We have a U-Haul with another U-Haul trailer attached to the U-Haul.
And we're moving in together at this point after we got married.
Yeah. You're driving, though. I'm doing sales calls in the cab of the truck.
And it's like super windy, and you're just like, sorry, there's a crazy storm outside. And like, you're like closing deals as we're starting this life together.
And then we got to the apartment, and it was like just getting dark, right? It was the end of the day. And you started, I looked like the worst person ever because I was still on a sales call in the cab of the truck when we pull up to the apartment. The sun has almost gone down.
I'm unloading the U-Haul.
She's unloading the
by
U-Haul.
Myself.
And like everybody on the street
honeymoon
is looking out their window going, he's sitting in the cab and she's carrying stuff in boxes out of the U-Haul.
Yeah, it's true.
Did you take the couch in on your own? You thought about it.
I took a lot. I don't remember if I got the couch or not. But honestly, like, that was one of those things. I think I knew we were going to work together from the first time.
You did?
That we got together. Is I knew that there was something that I wanted to build with you. Because at that time I had been building a business on my own for about a year. And I knew how freaking exhausting it was.
Yep.
Like to be the only one coming up with ideas, the only one having the vision, the only one pushing through, the only one delivering. I was like, I just want to find a partner who I can actually build.
You and I would both agree that the solo guys, the solo people that do build businesses completely by themselves, there's like an extra level of psychosis. Like
yeah,
business
you
partners
have to.
are great because you don't have to be that psychotic to be successful.
Well, maybe you have to be extra psychotic to want to do it with your spouse.
That is more psychotic.
Yeah, for sure. But I do genuinely think from the beginning, I saw you not just as a marriage partner. I knew I was looking for a business partner. I didn't know what kind of business we were going to build, but I knew it was going to be a platform to be able to help people. And so being able to see that in you from the very early beginning, that it was like I hadn't met anybody who had so much expertise in so many different areas. And so whether it was like your background going to law school or your digital marketing experience or your entrepreneurship or your sales, like all of these things kind of came together to just create this really exciting package for me. Because for me, when I found someone that I wanted to fall in love with, the first thing I knew I needed was to respect them. I needed to have to respect that person. Yeah. And by respect, I mean, I needed to be fascinated with them. And I was fascinated with you. I was like, how did this person go through all of this stuff, experience all these things, and have so much wisdom and inspiration? Because the first time we talked on the phone, I did not like you.
You did. You shouldn't have. Like in no dating manual would you ever do what I did on that phone call. I got on that phone call and I essentially laid out, divorced, laid off, all my stuff. Here you go. Nice to meet you. That was our first phone call. It was the first 90 minutes. And I had dated a little bit, like right before I met you. And I did that, and it was just such a great filtering mechanism because if somebody reacted to that poorly or didn't have any forgiveness or didn't exhibit any grace or looked like they were dramatic, done.
Yeah, it's
done.
true.
And for me, that was what I had experienced previously. Was drama, not high emotional intelligence, all of those things. And I was looking for no drama, no grudges, high emotional intelligence, intellectual curiosity, lifestyle of like fitness and nutrition. And that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. And I was fascinated by you as well because it's not, I don't know if most people date looking for someone they can build something with.
Right.
I think that's probably...
I think most people date trying to find someone to make them feel better about themselves. Like when you talk to most people, they're like, oh my gosh, I love how he makes me feel. I love how she makes me feel. Right. And I didn't really care how you made me feel. I just wanted to know, do you make me better?
Yeah. Yeah. Both of us felt that way.
Yeah.
Like we were looking for somebody that we would make each other better. And that maybe a lot of people, maybe unpopular opinion, most people get into a relationship just because there's romantic interest and attraction. Funny enough, I don't think that was either of our first order priorities.
Yeah.
I think our first order priority was shared vision, shared values, build something together, and also romantic interest and attraction. Sure. But I think it wasn't romantic interest and attraction, and then maybe we could build something together. It was let's build something together. And also,
well, honestly, I had dated a couple people right before you that I felt like they had some of those core elements that I was like, they're smart, they're driven, they're successful, but I wasn't attracted to them.
Yeah.
And so I had come to that point in my life where I was like, maybe I just don't get someone who's hot. Like maybe that's just what's going to happen.
As long as they're interesting and they're not hot.
Kinda.
Interesting's good enough.
But I learned what I liked and didn't like in a relationship. I think that's one of those things that, I grew up in a household where it wasn't frowned upon to date all the time, but it was kind of like, don't date unless you're ready to get married.
So don't date flippantly.
Totally. Yeah. And I totally disregarded that. Like I dated because I used dating as a networking tool. Yeah. I knew, especially in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Gab lived in Washington, D.C.
I was so broke, guys. I could not afford dinner, and so I would just go out on dates.
To get dinner.
And
get dates.
I mean, protein's expensive. What was I going to do? To get my great steak intake, ended up dating. And so I would date.
You ate steak?
I did at the time, yeah.
Because you like rarely ever eat steak.
I had steak last night. Goes
You
to
had
show
steak
you
last
how much you know me. I'm a new
you were
person.
just-
I keep the mystery alive.
So you remember, like, all of this started because I was obsessed with purpose. You know, coming into our relationship, like right before we got married, I had been researching purpose for almost a year. And I had like this one ratty legal pad that had a hypothesis of a purpose discovery process. And I couldn't stop talking about it. I mean, the first 2 years, you and I were running two separate things. I was essentially teaching people how to become self-published authors. That was my first course offering. And you were speaking on generations, millennials, generational leadership styles. And I couldn't stop talking about purpose. And so we were doing kind of our own separate thing for about a year. And then I was getting out of teaching people how to write books. And I was still obsessed with purpose, but I hadn't matured it. The idea wasn't there in terms of research and maturity to help companies understand how purpose had an ROI. And so one of the ways that, I think you remember this, like one of the ways that you and I started working together or tested it out was I was wrapping up that business and I suggested that we should just work together on speaking and training at first. And we could test out working. Because like we weren't totally sure how that would go, like the idea of working together.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it came down to the fact that we're both in the motivation space. You were working with individuals, helping them get motivated to write books. I was working on motivation inside of workplaces to make sure that people wanted to work harder, work longer, like show up. And both of us kind of came to this conclusion that motivation isn't the goal, because motivation requires way too much willpower.
Goal.
And so I think you are the one who came to me and you're like, it's not motivation, it's purpose.
Yeah.
Like we keep trying to pull people up and push them and get them to perform well at work, but they don't know their purpose. And so it really all comes down to remember that phone call that you had with that woman that you were trying to sell her.
Yep. So there, before you and I got married, I was selling essentially high ticket coaching programs. And I'll never forget this one call because I was still kind of dealing with my depression associated with going through a divorce, getting laid off. Who am I? What's my purpose? All of that. And this one lady that I was trying to move into a high ticket coaching program said, Brian, stop. Like in the middle, I was like reading a sales script. Like you and I have done tons of sales, but that was me as a new salesperson. And I was essentially just working from the script and doing it really poorly.
Right.
And so she said, Brian, stop. I can't buy anything from you. I don't know my purpose. And I just like in this, I don't know, fit of honesty, I told her, I don't either. And like wished her well, and like sale didn't close, hung up the phone, and that was one of those like spark moments for me that I have to figure this out. I have to figure it out for me, and clearly there's not a solution for people to be able to figure it out for themselves. And that was the beginning of me being like obsessed with it. I was already kind of researching it, but I became obsessed with it at that point.
And we were dating at the time, and I remember you calling me after that and saying like, Gab, I've got it. Like it is purpose. Because before, I think it was one of those things that you were interested in, but I think that it was like you needed to have someone so honestly say, I can't decide to do anything if I don't know my purpose.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge problem. And then I kept coming to you because you had been speaking to all these companies, helping them with retention, millennials, all the typical kind of corporate pain points. And I said, I think purpose is what they need.
Yeah. And I didn't believe you.
No, you did not.
Honestly.
You were like definitely not on the purpose train for that.
Well, it's only because I'm a big ROI person.
Yeah.
And so I said, yes, of course they need to know their purpose.
Yeah.
But who's going to pay for that?
Gab cares about the ROI.
I knew as a consultant at the time, someone who had a consulting company, I couldn't with a straight face go to companies and say, you should pay me to help your people find their purpose.
Right.
Because I didn't know if there was an ROI to purpose. I didn't know if I had them pay me to help them find their purpose, that they were going to stick around longer, work harder, do better. I just had no idea.
Yeah, and the research on purpose in the workplace wasn't really there yet.
Yeah,
this was a while back. There weren't all the studies that are out now prove that purpose helps, with retention. Purpose helps with customer experience. Purpose helps with cost savings, productivity, all the stuff. Like there's so much
There's
ROI.
so much data now that
purpose
points
is
to
performance.
It. But at the time,
purpose equals money. In
literally,
companies.
no one was really publishing anything like that.
Yeah. Like it was very obviously the answer.
Yeah.
again, the research back then wasn't there in terms of like McKinsey hadn't done studies on it yet. There wasn't a ton of research on it related like from Gallup or any of these organizations. It was just a really strong hunch that the individual that works in the workplace needs to feel that their purpose is individually connected to the mission of the organization or the mission of the team. That was like the idea.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed with it. And so I found my opening because we were doing a 2-day training with a big grocery store company, huge. And it was 2 straight days, 2 full days. And then, of course, you said, you know, you're hangry, so you wanted to step out.
I was like, literally, it's my session, but Brian, can you just cover it for a little bit? Like, Mama needs a snack.
Now, so before all this, I was like, it's got to be purpose. And you're like, it doesn't have an ROI. And then Gab steps out of the room because she gets hangry. And I'm like, great, turn off that PowerPoint. I shut down the PowerPoint, and I just went on a purpose riff.
Yeah, I mean, you started talking about one of the core elements of your purpose, which is your origin story. And so when that, by the way, I came back into the room, remember, and like everybody's crying. Literally everybody's crying. I was like, you broke all of the executives. Like, what in the world happened? And I remember it was at the end of that session that you and I looked at each other and we're like, we think that we have something here. Because it was the thing that ultimately so many people kept asking us for was, can you come back in and talk about purpose? So I will fully admit, I was so wrong. You were so right. But I think that goes back to your intuition. I think that your intuition was totally spot on, that you were like, I know that there's something here. And I didn't see it because I was just so stuck in the numbers. But I think that your intuition was totally right, that there was not an answer to the purpose question.
There wasn't. I mean, because everybody walks around the workplace or walks around their life with unanswered existential questions.
Yeah.
Who am I? Do I matter? Does my work matter?
Yep.
And in the context of work, it's do I matter and does my work matter?
Yeah.
And
Everyone's wondering those two things.
Yeah. And the only way to make that relevant to the individual is help the individual know their purpose and connect it to the mission of the organization.
Yeah.
That it's purpose, mission, relevance. It's the key factor on pretty much every human metric that leaders care about.
But I think that's what's so unique about the process that we've developed is because it was made with performance in mind.
Yep.
Whereas every other process to find your purpose has been more emotions-based, feeling-based. Like, honestly, it was like the luck of the draw if you find your purpose.
Yeah. I mean, less than 1% of people know their purpose, hands down, and way less than 1% of people who know their purpose even use their purpose or it's applied to their current situation. So most people are not living according to their purpose. So most people are not consistently living lives of fulfillment, which means that all of the research up till then on how to find your purpose was emotional, was subjective, was go find yourself in a sunset, go pay for an expensive trip to discover yourself. And none of that stuff works. It's not practical. It's not step-by-step. It doesn't inform decision-making. And it doesn't serve really anybody except for the less than 1% of people who, in all honesty, accidentally end up aligned with their purpose and accidentally end up doing something with it that makes money.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when they talk about purpose and saying, I found my purpose, it's usually in retrospect.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, now I realize that this was my purpose all along.
Wasn't intentional.
Which was not okay with us. I was like,
it's not good enough.
People do not deserve to finish out their life and then in retrospect realize whether or not they were on their purpose, in their purpose or not. Like,
how dissatisfying,
that's
right?
like a horrible final exam. Yeah, it's like, are you actually aligned with your purpose or not?
I'm at the end of my life.
Like,
did I pass? Did I not?
Yeah, it sucks. And we realized that people deserved more. And truly, we wouldn't be doing this if someone else was. Honestly, like I kind of felt like a kid lost at Costco. Like, is this my purpose? Is this my purpose? Like, is this the process I can use to find my purpose? Maybe I should go to this expensive retreat. Maybe I should follow this guru. Yep. Maybe this book will help me find it. And we were both so dissatisfied by what was already on the market that we felt compelled, right, to create something. Because I think that's the foundation of every great discovery, is creating for other people what someone wish. I think every great discovery starts with you creating for other people what you wish they created for you.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the best products are created from the founder's pain. That's it. The best products are created from the founder's pain. Like, you can always tell the difference between a company that was started by a founder who just saw that based on some percentage there was an opportunity there versus a company that was started by a founder who had actual pain around that specific pain point. The second one is always the better company because the founder had personal relevance. It was like the pain of the founder, it was personally relevant to him or her. and they went and solved for that.
Yeah.
For you and me, purpose was personally relevant to us because nobody had successfully shown us how to find it. And right around that time, with that grocery store company, when we recognized the emotional turning of a room and how they started getting along better, they started respecting each other in communication. All of a sudden, what they were doing together was personally relevant to them, not just, oh, I got to show up and got to do this job. It was personally relevant to them. That's when it began for us. That's when I feel like you and I, we were already doing it, but we really got started right after that. And it was like the next year that we were training, the U.S. Air Force, like the group responsible for all basic military training, the U.S. Air Force. And it just went on and on and on. And as we were doing more and more research was also coming out as to the ROI of purpose. Now there's tons of research on the ROI of purpose. And at that time, we were bound and determined to turn purpose discovery into a step-by-step process, not subjective, more objective, not emotional, but practical, and then get it to a place. And it was even our vision back then to get it to a place where we could create a first-in-the-world purpose discovery assessment that actually worked.
Do you remember when this whole thing started? Like when we started breaking down the process of finding purpose and then testing it out?
I do, because we would I think in our second apartment, we had a giant chalk wall.
Yeah.
Didn't we? We painted.
Yeah, we painted a wall in our kitchen with chalkboard paint.
Huge. So it was 9 feet tall by 6 feet wide.
Yeah.
Chalk wall in the kitchen.
Yeah. And we would literally have our friends over. We would cook them dinner and then test out these processes on them.
Yep.
Because we're like, here's a hypothesis. It worked for us. Will it work for you too?
Yeah. So when I go back to that, the hypothesis that I had, my first year and a half, and that year and a half began with the depression of getting laid off and getting divorced in the same month. And for a year and a half, I just demolished everything I could get my hands on. I was reading every book that was related to purpose. I was watching any documentary that was related to purpose. I was consuming anything that was remotely related to purpose. And the themes that I saw were essentially this. There was a bucket or something related to natural gifts, natural talents. There was a bucket related to skills. There was a bucket related to passion. And there was a bucket related to coming of age and origin story. Those are the 4 buckets that I kept seeing. So I was reading. As I read more, I just kept seeing those themes come up time and time again. And I had not seen any book or resource talk about all 4. All I saw was books, resources, and documentaries or courses that talked about maybe one piece of those things. And what I realized the opportunity was that those 4 things represented purpose as a whole, like the whole picture of purpose. And then the hypothesis became, what if purpose had 4 parts and you could turn its discovery into a 4-step sequence, a process? So how could I break it into parts and turn it into a process was the question that I had. So when we first started trying this out on our friends on this giant chalk wall in the kitchen, we'd invite them over. We knew the names of these 4 parts. And unlike our assessment today, we had not any research yet on the archetypes for each one of those elements. And we would we helped a lot of our friends, but it was looking back now, you think, wow, that was really early on, but still tremendously helpful.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we started off with helping our friends, and then we started testing it out on some of our clients, and then we started doing it in workshops. And I mean, looking back, we had this hypothesis, right? And when you have a hypothesis, you need to test it. And so it wasn't just that we were testing the elements, we were testing, does it make sense? When we communicate it this way, is this resonating? Do people identify with this? And more importantly, we were measuring the transformation. I mean, early on, some of the first people we had go through this process had crazy results. Sometimes we looked at each other and we were like,
no way that happened.
No way that happened. Yeah. One of the first people who went through this process, remember, I think she was either out of work in between jobs or something. And she went from going through this process to getting a job at
United Nations.
United Nations, yeah. Yep. And it was bananas to see the acceleration of clarity that happened to people after they found their purpose. I mean, they had gone from one of our friends was so frustrated with being an attorney, but was really passionate about social justice issues. And she ended up moving across the country and focusing her time and effort helping. What did she end up doing?
She was helping victims of human trafficking.
Through media and the arts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she was like essentially the attorney that would work with movies that were exposing human trafficking and raising awareness. And so what was so cool was the clarity that came from people combining not just that passion inside of them, but the skills that they had acquired. And so it was like time and time again, we just kind of continued to refine the process and realized we have something here.
Yeah.
And again, it didn't just work for us, it started to work for other people.
So we get into COVID and we release The Purpose Factor. So The Purpose Factor, our book, came out during COVID. And it was kind of a question for us, right? Because the book was great. It turned out awesome. It got released during COVID, which like you've wanted for 2 or 3 years to release a book. You want to go on the radio tour. You want to do all the public stuff associated with releasing your first published book, and COVID hits. So it was not that exciting when it came out. And it was even one of those questions where we were like, should we hold on to this for a year or two and not release it yet because it's COVID? And also, if we held on to it for a year or two, maybe we could have a greater audience to push it to. And the decision we made was, it's not about the book. It's not about even out of the gate it becoming a bestseller. It was getting it into the hands of the people that were right in front of us, and it be the forerunner to everything that we were doing now. So we released The Purpose Factor during COVID because, well, we didn't have a whole lot to do. Like we were doing like $500,000, $600,000 a year in speaking and training with companies and keynotes, and all of that went to zero.
Yeah.
All of it went to zero. All of it went away. And we were forced to consider for the first time, what would our business look like digitally? And I remember in 2020, it felt like we were starting a company again.
Yeah, it really did. But I think why we decided to make the release in COVID really like go all in at that point was because purpose becomes so much more relevant when you're having an existential crisis.
Yeah, it does.
And the world was having an existential crisis.
Existential crisis.
We were all wondering, is this worth it? We were all wondering what's next. We were all wondering, why in the world are we here? And to have a system and a tool set like the Purpose Factor, it really did make a big difference in people's lives. Like the amount of people, and we got letters from people saying, hey, I tried to take my own life, and this system is actually one of the reasons why I'm still here.
Yep.
Like when you get notes like that saying that your system helped keep someone from maybe taking their own life, like that is such affirmation that not only have we created something that has incredible value, I think it points to the fact that it's something that really works. And ultimately that's why we started this, right? It's like we wanted something that worked. Like we were tired of systems that was like, climb up to the side of a mountain, like look out at the sunset, and like then maybe you'll find your purpose. Or like, go to this really ridiculously expensive retreat. Yeah. And then like pay some person to tell you what to do with your life. We're like, bro, that doesn't work.
And it's really fascinating too, because like we've been to a lot now. Looking back, we've been to a lot of expensive retreats, expensive masterminds, expensive coaching experiences, and it is hysterical how bad the purpose discovery stuff is in some of the most elite experiences.
Oh, for sure.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll pick up big, famous, unnamed magazine at the airport because the cover is something about purpose, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is this famous branded magazine. Surely they would have a good article on purpose. And you crack it open and it's fluff. It's just fluff. It's just no good definitions, no good purpose discovery process, and you leave no better having read the article.
Yeah. Well, for us, I mean, everything comes down to what pisses us off. And so if you want to know what to do next with your life, pay attention to what pisses you off. It pissed us off that people did not know their purpose.
Yep.
And then it pissed us off even more that there wasn't a process that people could follow to find their purpose. And that's really where everything started for us, is like, this is something that's so frustrating for us. And we felt a moral obligation to first find it for ourselves. And then once we found it, we knew we had to share it with the world.
Yep. And during COVID, because we released the book right at the beginning of COVID, then we released our first, coaching product to help people discover their exact purpose so they could know what was next for them in the midst of COVID while everybody was having a collective existential crisis. We took on, over 1,000 clients around the world.
Yeah, it was overwhelming.
In that programming. I mean, our business grew more in that period of time than our business had ever grown previously. That's when we became a 7-figure company for the first time. And then we knew what we were progressing to. So we started with the book, which was a forerunner to the program. And then the program was the forerunner to what our big target was. Our big target was, can we create a scalable purpose discovery assessment that actually works? Where instead of leaning into the person who's having the existential crisis and ask the person who's having the existential crisis to be able to say, yeah, I think this is my purpose. The idea was, hey, sit down, answer these questions in about 20 to 25 minutes, and you're going to get a full report on your purpose in an assessment. Kind of like MBTI, Strengths Finders, et cetera, but not a personality assessment, not strengths and weaknesses, a literal assessment that would speak to your purpose and your identity. And that's the phase of where we're at now. I mean, we're going to grow. We hit the Inc. 5000 list. That was a huge thing. Hit the Inc. 5000 list, 580 out of 5,000 companies last year. And we will definitely hit that again and again over the next couple of years, because now there's a scalable purpose discovery tool. You don't even have to go through a coaching experience now to discover your purpose. You can sit down on a tablet, answer some questions, and get a full report. We were coaches who didn't like life coaches. How many times did we talk about how we almost begrudged the fact that we were even potentially known as life coaches?
Yeah.
I hated that. I hated that designation. I didn't want to be known as a life coach.
Yeah, I hate being called a life coach.
I don't even like the word coach.
I know. I honestly, I mean, when people say, hey, here's my life coach, I'm more of like, I'm a strategist. Like I don't need to coach you into something, because that means that I'm now your outside motivation, versus a strategist. Like, here's the system and the strategy for you to then follow through with. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times people rely too much. Here, let me say this. I think the people who become life coaches are very well intended.
Yeah.
I think that people become life coaches because they want to help other people, plain and simple. But the reason why they're not effective is because they don't know how to help people find their purpose.
Right.
Like, truly.
And that's the first step.
Yes.
Like the first step. If you ask any person who is a good coach, most good coaching relies upon the client to have some sense of what they want to do with their life, and then be coached into the thing that they already kind of know they want to do. But that's less than 10% of people who need coaching. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of people who need coaching, the first step is some form of clarity, but specifically they need to know their exact purpose, because purpose is like the basis and the foundation that everything else comes from. And a lot of coaches struggle because they actually do have good step-by-steps for the strategy part. Like, hey, if you want to become a successful attorney and you want to be a partner in 6 years, I can show you step-by-step on how to do that. But if the person that is being coached doesn't know their purpose, they don't even know why becoming a partner-level attorney is relevant to their life right now, or if it's even worth it. Because purpose really is about answering the question, is what I'm doing worth it? Will this pursuit be worth it? Am I going to spend 7 years on this and it actually be worth it? Because if you can't answer that question, by the way, if you can't answer that what you're doing is worth it, then you won't sacrifice for it. If you can't sacrifice for it, you're not going to be successful. So purpose really was the foundational number one domino for everything. And so that's why Gabrielle and I became like really obsessed with it, because we knew that was the first step to everything.
And honestly, it's not life coaches' fault that they don't know how to help people find their purpose. That is literally why we created our purpose factor assessment, is so that life coaches could use it to help their people find their purpose.
Correct.
Like, we recognize not everybody's an expert in purpose, so we're like, use our system and our tool to help your clients get better results. Mm-hmm. Like, truly, at the end of the day, we see ourselves as people who are equipping people with tools to help other people find their purpose. Like, we've spent over a decade pushing through, ideating, testing, tracking, growing this system so other people can take and use it. Truly, at the end of the day, we want to democratize purpose. We want to help the world find their purpose. And we know it can't just be between the two of us. We have to create a system and a tool that's ultimately scalable through relationships, through helping people help people find their purpose.
I remember the first time you said that phrase, democratize purpose, because it really is what we're doing. It is purpose for the 1% and the 99%. It's purpose for everybody, not purpose for people who just stumble into it. I just get, you see it all the time. You see like your garden variety tech billionaire give a graduation speech, and they're like, just be passionate about what you do. And I mean, this is kind of an aside, but the word passion is just so stupid.
It's such crap.
It's such a crappy word. Like, it's literally defined as a barely controllable emotion in the Oxford Dictionary.
Advice.
It's the worst decision-making tool, full stop, period. And all of these billionaires get up on these graduation speeches and they're like, hey, just be passionate. But none of them, that's not the word that even describes them as they were becoming the billionaire tech founder. It's not motivation. It's not passion. The word that would easily describe all of them is conviction. Like, these guys, these women were willing to crawl over broken glass to achieve what they wanted. That's not passion, because when you don't have a barely controllable emotion for something, you still have to, I don't know, do payroll. I don't know, go find investors. You have to go do all this stuff you don't necessarily want to do every day. That's not passion. That's not motivation. That's I'm willing to do whatever it takes to achieve the thing. That's conviction. Conviction's the word. And it's this, I describe it as this. It's this unreasonable certainty that what you're doing is right and worth it. Conviction is that unreasonable certainty that what you're doing is right and worth it. Unreasonable in the face of unreasonable to the reasonable, certain in the face of uncertainty, rightly aligned with your purpose, and worth the sacrifice. Worth the sacrifice. And you know, it's interesting that it seems like what holds people back from knowing their purpose the most is having the wrong definition of purpose. Most people like conflate it with why. Most people like confuse it with passion. Most people confuse it with a whole lot of things. But purpose really is this. Purpose is the best of what you have to help others. So your goal when you're finding your purpose is to specifically discover the best of what you have to contribute to some group of people that you're best fit to serve. And then what you're really looking for, because everybody's not really looking for purpose. Everybody's looking for happiness, or they're looking for some sense of joy. I think the word fulfillment is a much better word, because it speaks to the depth of what we want to feel when we're living a life of, you know, consistent contribution. But fulfillment's the feedback loop on living a life of purpose. I give purpose away, I get fulfillment back from the people that I serve through things like gratitude, you know, having the opportunity to observe the result of my giving or helping somebody, or even just personally growing. But purpose really, if you're going to find your purpose, you got to know what it is. And purpose is the best of what you have to help others. So your goal and your target is to specifically discover the best of what you have.
But that is why we're so passionate about this. That is why we work so hard at this, is because our goal, our mission is to help 1 billion people find and use their purpose.
Not just that. We actually, because like when you look at the great research organizations of the world, like Gallup or McKinsey or any of these great consulting companies or research companies, is we want to do the most research that's ever been done on purpose ever. For example, like Gallup has the most research ever collected on the workplace in probably over 120 countries around the world. That's why they can do these like global workplace indexes. So we want to help 1 billion people discover their purpose around the world, but also we want to collect and do the most research that's ever been done on purpose in the history of the world.
And we're not going to give up until we do. I mean, truly, we see it as our moral obligation to not only help 1 billion people find their purpose, but to collect that information and that data. Because once you actually see that purpose is integral to decision making, like purpose is the fulcrum by which everybody makes decisions, it blows your mind. And so purpose is the thing that will inform elections. Purpose is the thing that will inform market trends. Purpose is the thing that will inform the changing trends of what kind of jobs or people are going after, or what kind of companies people are starting. Once you realize that purpose is that piece, everything else is going to fall into line. And that's the stuff that we nerd out about. That's the stuff we're super excited about.
And there's never been a greater time to research purpose, because now it's not just, okay, what do all these survey assessment responses say about how people feel or what their purpose is or what the trends are. There's never been a better time, especially in the age of AI, to do data aggregation, to look at open-ended response to see what the words and phrases indicate about how people are feeling and where they want to go. I think there's never been a better time to research a subject that has long been perceived as subjective, fluffy. We want to flip that on its head.
And I think it really did take a couple of 30-somethings to be crazy enough to say, we have to create a system to help people find their purpose, and we have to see this thing through to the end. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not enough just to say everybody should find their purpose, peace out, bye. We recognize that there needs to be a tool set that gets inserted into the education system, that gets inserted into companies and their hiring systems, that gets inserted into family discussions. Like one of the big things we talk about all the time, like the stuff that we love dreaming about, is changing the conversation around the conference table and the dinner table. That perspective shift of how do we change conversations that move away from logistics and move them more towards meaning. That's the kind of stuff, like that's what we want our legacy to be. And whether or not they know Brian and Gab and there's any sort of association with us in particular, that's not as important to us as knowing that we know that we made a ripple effect.
Yep.
We know that we created something that changed the perspective of people who were looking for clarity on what's next. We hope that when you show up and you listen to us on our podcast, on our channel, that you recognize that this isn't about us. This isn't the Brian Gab Show. We care so much about you living out your purpose. We want you to have more clarity and conviction and confidence in what's next. And that the evidence of you showing up and you listening to this content is that you have more confidence waking up every day, that you know that this is what you're supposed to be doing, that you know that this is the relationship that you're supposed to be in, that you know that this is the business that you're supposed to start or the company you're supposed to stay at. The clarity component should be the evidence that we're doing our jobs. And so we hope that you get from us that we really care, truly care, that you not only know your purpose, but have a platform to use your purpose every single day. And our most fulfilled days for us is when we get notes from you, DMs, messages saying, not only have you been able to find your purpose, that you're serving other people with your purpose every single day. For us, that's like the hugest win ever, is knowing that something that we did, content we created, information we provided, a tool we released into the marketplace impacted you and your family in a truly personal way.
So my hope is if you come across this content, there's probably a reason. You're probably wondering what's next for me. You're probably wondering what's my purpose. You're probably trying to figure out what to do in your career next. You're probably trying to figure out, should you switch from being in a career to going to entrepreneurship? You're probably trying to make some type of decision at some type of crossroad. So it's my hope that if you're watching this content, that you're going to find your exact purpose. You're going to know exactly what to do next. And you're going to see the steps, like a clear-cut path to figuring out what you're going to do in the next phase of your life.
So our goal is to create a community. We want to create a movement of people finding their purpose and using their purpose. And so we need your help to do that. So we would love if you have a question around what's next, you're trying to get clarity. Maybe you just need confirmation that what you're doing is what you should be doing. There's literally no question too small or inconsequential. We want to hear from you. So every single episode, we're going to be answering questions from you. So submit your questions so that way we can provide context for you, clarity, and hopefully some encouragement that you are on the right path.